Thanks, guys, for being with us today. I want to introduce our panel that we have with us. First, I want to introduce my co-host for the day. Most people know him, I think, but without further ado, John Bauer.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for being with us. I asked everybody on the panel for a little bio. So these are John's words. I'll introduce him just in case you don't know him. John is a self-proclaimed hyper extrovert and a feeler, deep feeler. He's an elder here at Covenant Pres Church, and he and his wife Julie have 3 kids. Catherine, who's a senior, Elizabeth, who's a freshman in high school, both high school, and then Christopher is a 7th grader, all at Westminster. John wants to use this opportunity, wanted me to tell everyone, to warn you that when we all meet together again, there will be lots of hugs and handshakes. So thanks for that, John.
Of course.
We're glad you're here. I just wanted
Thank
him
you.
to be part of our session and our leadership to help kind of ask questions today. So next on our panel, we have Dr. Diane Powell. Hi, Diane.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Just to introduce Diane. Diane has her PhD in marital and family therapy and her master's in professional counseling. So Diane has been practicing therapy for 37 years. Is that right?
That's right.
And she has her own practice, Diane Powell and Associates. Diane specializes in women's issues, abuse and trauma, and as well as marital and family therapy. So thanks for being with us, Diane.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I haven't called you doctor before now. But we also have, next we have Chad Frizzell. Hey, Chad.
Hello. Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Chad is a therapist currently at Crossroads Counseling and works mainly with couples and men. He and his wife, Julie, have 3 kids, Mary, Emma, and Denver. Those are Denver's cool drum set in the back. When he isn't working or with his family, you can find Chad, he says, in the woods and the rivers, whenever he gets a chance. So it's good to be with you, Chad. And last but not least, we have Jenny Jones. Hey, Jenny.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Jenny recently graduated from Covenant Seminary with 2 masters, one in counseling and one in educational ministries. She currently works at the Kaleo Counseling Services and sees a variety of clients from teens to couples. And she's very passionate about meeting people in their pain and walking alongside them towards healing and change. So all of these wonderful professional folks are part of our church family here at Covenant. So we just thought it'd be a good idea to have them speak into what we might be experiencing right now with our emotions going through this pandemic. And I don't know about y'all, but I've been feeling feelings in a big way just in the last few weeks with all the changes. So we just wanted to give space and language to help navigate through what we might be experiencing. So we're going to just jump into some of our questions now. And thank you again for being with us. So this is to the whole panel. Since none of us have experienced life in a pandemic before, I know for me and I know for John, we've talked about it's been hard for us to even describe how we're feeling because we don't have anything to compare it to. Can y'all speak into this at all, or can you maybe give us some language to help frame it in a better way? Might be helpful.
Well, I think that we would all agree that the feelings that we have are just much more intense now than they've ever been. But I don't think the feelings are new, but the circumstances are new. And so the feelings seem like they're new. But underlying the challenges are feelings of uncertainty, fear, fear of the unknown, fear of the known, sadness at loss, anxiety, because of feelings and experiencing powerlessness, and in our own daily lives, helplessness, anger, worry, and for me, impatience.
That's helpful to name. I feel like I've had all of those sometimes in the same day. Yeah, Chad or Jenny, what do y'all have helpful things to help name?
Yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead, Chad.
You sure? Yeah. I I like how you said we haven't experienced these before, and whenever you're entering into something you haven't experienced or you don't know what the step is, this is where I find wisdom literature in the Old Testament really helpful. Because when you don't know what to do next or understand what's going on, that's where you need wisdom, not really instruction, so to speak. And so we have this language that was given to us by God that, these kind of swirling emotions can travel on, so to speak, when we don't have language ourselves. And then as our language sort of travels on it, we may maybe start to understand things better, which doesn't change the immediate circumstances in any way. But when we understand things better, we're less frozen and stuck. And so other domains of our life can begin to move a little bit, even when the circumstances don't change.
That's helpful. Yeah. The wisdom literature in Psalms especially is helpful to kind of frame our emotions for sure. Because God definitely created us with emotions. So he knows. Yeah, Jenny, what were you going to share?
Yeah, I think the biggest theme that I've seen is loss. And I think I think all these emotions are coming from this experience of loss. And we're all grieving the life we once knew. And we're grieving essentially everything. Like our norm is gone. And we're grieving the loss of, I think the biggest loss we're all grieving is the loss of relationships. And I think video calls help, but it's not the same as being with someone else in person. And I think once we can recognize and name these losses that we're experiencing, we can move into that grief and experience all these other emotions. But I think I'm just like loss. We're all losing something and everything in this moment. And that just feels so prevalent right now.
Jenny, I think your language of grieving is something that I've thought through a lot, and that's really good language to use. And I know Ryan on several occasions in church has talked about lament, and that's another good, emotion to talk about. But grieving and talking about the different, the emotions that come with grieving. I know as I've read things on that, that's really helped me a lot. So having that grieving and lament language is really good. Let me ask you, Jenny, and I know you deal a lot with teenagers and with kids. I'm the dad of 3 teenagers, and they're experiencing a lot of loss. And how can I mean, this is something like we said, I've never gone through myself. How can I help them process this when this is something that I've never dealt with before?
Yeah, that's a great question that I'm guessing a lot of parents are asking. And I think the biggest thing is creating space for them to kind of just feel, and being curious about what they're feeling and not being afraid of what they're about to tell you. And then whatever they're telling you, it's not your job to fix it. It's simply your job just to listen to them. And then practically, I think, all of these kids are breaking the norm of their schedules. None of them have a schedule anymore. And so I think maybe having your child, like this is a practical example, but having your child sit down and create a schedule, and it can be very loose. Like in the morning, you're going to get up at 11, whatever time they're getting up.
You've heard about teenagers, yeah.
Take breakfast and then spend, do you want to spend the next 3 hours working on homework or whatever? And then also the biggest thing we can do, all of us, not just kids, is be active. So maybe send them outside for a few hours, tell them to go on a walk, have them do a class online. They don't even need to go outside, just something active. That is really good, especially as like our bodies are experiencing so much right now, it can be a good way for us to just kind of get back into ourselves a little bit. And then another thing is have them talk to someone outside of your house, someone reliable, someone safe. I'm guessing their school counselors are not doing anything right now if they wanted to contact their school counselors, and they're probably looking for something to do. Or I'm sure the youth is doing, I'm sure Greg is doing a great job connecting with students, but just practically having, so they can have an outlet that they can be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of my parents. We spent 40 days together and haven't seen anyone else. So those are kind of the things that come to mind as we kind of grieve all of this together and figure out life. Because I think teens are kind of probably feeling it the most. Because so much of their livelihood is at school.
Right.
So.
Right. And we've got a senior, and so that's just carried a whole lot of weight with it as well, is trying to figure out how are we going to transition out of this stage of life for her and move into the next when there's so much uncertainty over the next, really honestly 6 to 8 months. We don't know what's going to happen, and trying to walk through that with her and help her with that. So yeah, that's a lot of loss, especially for them.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a little bit helpful that we're all experiencing the same thing. Like, it's not like you can be like, oh, Catherine, this is what's going to happen. It's like, no, we're all in this together. So I'm sure there's some, I don't know, happiness in that.
Yeah. Those are really helpful things.
Thanks, Jenny. For that, I was going to ask Diane specifically. With my role here at church, I have a lot of mom friends who have kids at home, and also just being single myself, I am, definitely aware of people who might be isolated just physically, who live alone. Are there questions that I can ask, or as a friend that we can ask people that we care about, who might be feeling overwhelmed? That might just be a loving question to ask, helping them with these emotions.
Well, when I started the counseling program for my master's degree, I thought that to be a good counselor, you needed to ask lots of questions. And the problem with that was that the assumption was if I was going to ask the questions, I would know the answers. And so they would answer, and I was supposed to know what to do with that. Over the years, I found that we have to use caution when we ask questions, because if we ask a person a question, it draws them into believing that that we're very close to them and that we've earned that relationship. We're sort of offering them a promise that when they tell us their answer, we're going to be right there with them. And it's really an invitation. And that even asking the question and promising that relationship, whether it's intended or not, will offer some kind of a calming certainty to the person. So what I have found is that when you're going to be with a person and you have a question you want to ask, before you do that, ask yourself, what are you looking for in their answer? And what are you prepared to do with the question that they're asking? It puts a lot of pressure on you to now follow that question up. What I would recommend is, instead of asking questions, I would come beside the person, sitting across from them on the phone, on Zoom, and after the question came up, which is the usual question of, well, how are you doing? The next step that I would recommend is saying, well, here's how I'm doing. And this is a hard time for me. And one of the things we talked about early on about the uncertainty and the loss. And so that's what this is like for me. And then see what happens. Usually, because you've offered that, they will be open and sort of say, yeah, me too. then you can say, well, what's it like for you? Tell me some of the stuff that's going on for you. What are your days like? Now, I know those are questions, but they're questions that are designed to open up the conversation. They don't require an answer from you as an expert, but instead it's saying, I want to understand you. I want to see if I can walk beside you. Very inviting.
Yeah, I like that language of it's an invitation to share that person's life and what's actually going on. That's helpful. Thanks, Diane. This is to the whole panel now. I was kind of wanting to know, and as we were talking at our staff meeting the other day, we were just kind of wanting to know what might be some common threads or themes that you're hearing from some of your clients right now. I'm sure, like you said, everybody's going through the same thing, but everybody handles it differently. But what are some common themes or threads that have come up as far as topics or what people are going through or experiencing?
Well, I'll say one thing that I'm seeing frequently is really a preoccupation with a timeline, and also kind of a desire to rush to recovery, which is completely sympathetic to. I mean, we all want to see life return to normal. But I see it kind of falling into two camps. There's maybe one camp that would think this is overblown and when are we going to get past this? And some of that may be not wanting to feel the fear surrounding it. And then for another camp is at times just not able to think about anything else but COVID, right? So a fixation on it, and no life can continue until this is gone, or I completely understand it. And so you kind of have this frozen element, and really just trying to live with an unwanted traveling companion right now is how do we live our lives? Well, we have this thing in our life that we didn't invite to come in. You know?
I think I would piggyback on that and say that in light of all of those things, a common thread is the person, whether it's a parent or a student, just about anybody, they say, I think I'm supposed to be doing this a certain way. I'm supposed to be living in this time a certain way. If I'm a parent, I am supposed to be the best homeschooling parent you've ever seen. And, you know, somehow I am supposed to figure out how to live now in this very different life. And I'm not doing it. I can't do it. And so the stress level just goes up, and the person feels more like a failure than if they hadn't even started on that path and just said, this is hard. That's a real common theme, that the person just doesn't give themselves credit for the fact that they're entering this stuff with courage and they're trying.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Diane, because I feel like I kind of have seen, I'm not sure I've seen one common thing. Like, I feel like I've seen some of my clients are kind of like, this is okay right now. I'm enjoying being at home, like taking a break a little. And then I've seen clients that are just mad, that want to rush back to life as normal. And then I have clients that are thankful that things aren't worse for them. So I don't know. I feel like it's just, I feel like we're all experiencing this roller coaster of emotions. And even one day, if a client is content, the next session, they're not. And so I feel like whatever we're feeling is normal. It's, I don't know. There's not one way, I guess.
That's helpful to name. Just, yeah, we haven't experienced this, but whatever you're feeling is normal, even if you don't even know what to do with it in the moment. Yeah, just that pressure that we put on ourselves to think we should know how to do it a certain way. Like Diane said, that was helpful to name. Yeah,
not just a certain way, the perfect
way. Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. And not giving ourselves grace to feel the feelings and to we aren't all professional teachers and, you know, teaching at home, and everything's different and everything's new. So yeah, giving that grace to yourself, I think, is important. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think John had something he wanted to ask specifically to Chad.
Yeah, kind of off on that. I mean, unfortunately, I think men tend to think we need to have it all together perfectly a lot more sometimes. And Chad, I'm curious to know, I mean, you deal with a lot of men in your counseling. Have you noticed particular difficulties that men are having in naming the feelings? And if you are, just if you could share kind of maybe as guys, what are some good questions to either ask ourselves as we're going through this? Because I mean, like I said earlier, I've gone through a lot of the emotions and trying to find the names for those. What are some good questions to ask us and ourselves? And what are good questions to ask in conversations that we're having with other guys?
Yeah, I might maybe just begin with some of the why. You know, I think it is true that in general, and I would put myself in that category, men are less familiar with naming emotions. And I think some of that is a lot of men believe it's an option to not emotionally participate with the events of our lives. But the longer you live, the more you realize these emotions are coming out either way. So they can come out with words and expression that other people can understand and participate in, or they can come out with behaviors that other people might not understand or can't participate in, and sometimes can be destructive. So we think on the most extreme side, aggression, addiction, or withdrawal, disengagement from life. And so I think there's some fear there that if men start to participate with their emotions, they will become overpowered and maudlin. They'll get absorbed by their emotions and they'll lose their strength. A second fear is they'll be seen as complainers, right? And then if you're a complainer, you feel isolated. Who wants to listen to that? And so the first would be about, I would want to talk about just fear of being overpowered, is I think it's actually the opposite. You know, when you start to work through your emotions, you'll find that you can actually handle more, not less. You know, because you are no longer rigidly trying to control an uncontrollable environment, which will make you brittle. You'll take more risks, you'll stick your neck out, you'll be able to handle a bit more. And then secondly, the idea of being a complainer, a complaint is very different than a lament. And I think Dr. Collins and Ryan Laughlin have handled lament very, very well. There's very little I could add to it. Other than to say, you know, if you think about a complaint is really about being made whole in a mercantile sense. If you think about the last complaint letter you wrote to as a dissatisfied consumer, you were not interested in learning or growth. You wanted to be squared up. Where a lament is really interested in learning and growth, usually alongside someone you trust and you see yourself having a future with. So framing your language as a lament to others and with God is an honorable thing. It's a compliment. It's saying, I trust you enough to bring this to you. I believe we have a future together. So I think it's important for men to see tethering emotions in that category, because that's more courage over calculations there. And so I think you asked about questions, probably more so than the specific questions, is that if you're going to ask a question of yourself or invite someone else to do that the question would be asked with curiosity and gentleness, and not like a cross-examination. And I pray you forgive me that as an attorney, that
it's an example I can understand.
Yeah, that you would, so, and I find the questions are best framed around reactions. So if I'm in my kitchen and I can't get the Tupperware drawer to close because it's never going to close again, the Tupperware drawer won't close, and I just lose it, to sort of back up and say, wow, that was a strong reaction. I wonder what's behind that. And so you slow down and sit down rather than saying, oh, that was just a blip, what's next? And that you remain curious and gentle about that event. The same thing with maybe an underreaction where you receive some really bad news and there's no reaction. To sit down and slow down and say, I wonder why I'm not responding to this. rather than just pushing on and saying, oh, well, what's next? Yeah.
It's really, yeah. And so it's as much how you react and how you look at it as much as what you're saying when you react. That's good to know.
Yeah. How you explore it.
Right. Right.
That's how I like that language of sit. What did you say? Sit and
slow down and sit down.
Slow down and sit down. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Just to even look. Don't be afraid to even look at it. Yeah, that kind of segues to the next question for the panel of just even as believers, I think sometimes it can be hard, or we even hesitate to even engage with certain emotions like anger or sadness, even especially anger. And I think a lot of times we want to push it aside and say, oh, but I have the joy of the Lord, and that's all I'm supposed to have. And I don't know. I want to kind of give a little discussion on, as Christians, obviously we have emotions. Obviously emotions aren't wrong to have, but how we deal with them is important. I've gotten some questions from people that I care about and love, as other believers, who are asking things like, today I was a little scared. I felt scared because of this pandemic. Does that mean I'm not praying enough? Does that mean I'm, not trusting Jesus enough? Can you kind of speak into that, those particular emotions? Yeah, just as believers, and how we can respond to those well in ourselves and to others.
I'll go. I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll try to think of just a couple. But I think the biggest thing that I keep thinking about is, like, the Lord can handle our emotions. And I think oftentimes we're scared to feel angry. We're scared to feel sad because we think in some ways like we have a disappointing father looking down on us, but that's not true. And the truth of it is, we have a father that cares deeply and feels that with us. And so whatever we're feeling, sadness, happiness, disappointment, the Lord cares deeply, and he is passionate about his people and caring for his people. And I think he made us as people to feel. And the more we feel, the more we know him, and the more we know about him. Because I think it reveals his heart for us. And so, I don't know, I think this is encouragement to myself too, that we all just move towards him and give it to him, because he's not afraid of our kicking and screaming, or our tears. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that has been on my mind, thinking about emotions and all of this.
Thanks, Jenny. It's helpful. Diane, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think that for Christians specifically, what we're going to want to do is get a biblical view of emotions. And what I have found the most freeing over the years is looking at the way Jesus expressed emotions. And so he was free. He was unpredictable. I'm not talking about what would Jesus do, but I'm saying, what did he do? So the stories we have of him in the gospel represent a man that laughed and got angry and wept. He was brilliant in terms of talking to the Pharisees, caring and loving for those in need. And if I can go there, I have examples of Jesus And none of them come with shoulds.
Mm.
So that's the thing I would say the most for me that's helped is I'm not going to get straight up concrete images because Jesus was too multifaceted and unpredictable, and yet he was God.
That's helpful to think about in that framework. I think it's also, I mean, interesting, just, yeah, like you said, it multifaceted. I mean, people are complicated and we can be experiencing several emotions at once. I mean, I can have the joy of the Lord and still say, Lord, I trust you. Who you are is who you said you are. And I know that you're good, but I'm still feeling really sad today. And I think we can have those in tension, just as humans, as God created us complex beings. But yeah, I kind of jumped in before Chad spoke, but is there something that you thought?
I mean, I have very little to add other than to just kind of tack on to what Ginny said about, God actually wanting to hear these emotions. And I mean, I guess I go to the comparison, that Jesus makes when he says, who among you, if your child asks for a fish, would hand him a snake? As a flawed parent, how much more your Father in heaven? And I think about my flawed fatherhood and my children walking in the door in distress, and I say, how are you doing? And they say, fine, in a monotone voice, and they go upstairs. And I'm just like, I'm begging you to tell me, please tell me what's going on. I feel deprived in that moment because I'm deprived of connection and want to be involved. So I just think how much more God of saying, no, tell me. I have the shoulders for it. I want it. So
It is kind of back to that language of invitation, right? Of being known. God invites us into relationships, and he desires to know. He already knows what's going on, but it's a relational when we are able to pour those out to him. I mean, it's helpful. Sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling, so I a lot of times like to go outside and take a journal. And I just ask the Lord to help me navigate through what I'm actually unpacking, what I'm feeling. And I just start writing and stuff comes out and I give that to him. And that's been really helpful just in my everyday life, but especially now. But yeah, I think that just knowing that as Christians, God has given us a framework of how he himself has emotions, but also as creatures that he created, him giving us those emotions and how we direct those is important to him.
And Mary, I was going to add to that. It seems so important as we talk about that. We need to remind ourselves of the grace, but it's also, I think it's really important. And I'm sure I have relative confidence, even though I have no counseling experience, I have relative confidence they would agree that we have people around us, even if it's in a setting like this, that we can talk to that can remind us of that. Because so many times we don't give ourselves the grace that we sometimes give a lot of other people. And we need somebody else to speak back up into our lives and say, it's okay to feel that way. And to be reminded. I had a situation where we had something going on with my dad that we can't see right now. And I was pretty upset when it happened. And I talked to the guy where my dad's living here in St. Peter's, and I apologized. And he said, you don't need to apologize. And I don't know where he is spiritually, but just to have somebody say to me, you don't need to, because we're all dealing with something completely different. And this is how it came out right then. And that's okay. And but we need people on a regular basis in our lives. And that's why we're all lonely in a way, but even having this from time to time is almost even more essential in times like this.
Yeah, that's easy to forget that we're all going through it.
Yeah.
Together.
Exactly.
Even though we might be dealing with it differently. I was gonna ask everyone, what might be some resources that you can point us to, even for self-care or helping come alongside others in a crisis? Because that's what we are essentially in right now, is a crisis. So yeah, what might be some places you could point to or resources that you think are helpful to kind of pass along?
I have 2 books that I have found helpful over the years. One is called The Lost Art of Listening, and it's by a man named Michael Nichols. And it's an old book, but it has been reprinted many times. It's one of the best books that I've ever read on not only how to listen, but what the impact of being listened to is. And then the other one is by Dr. Dan Allender, and it's called The Healing Path. Again, that book just, when I read it, it was a life changer. Those would be 2 that I can think of.
Those are helpful. I've only read that Allender book, but yeah, it cuts you to the core, but it really gets to the heart of emotions and how they impact you. Jenny, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I have another Dan Allender one. Cry of the Soul.
Oh yeah.
He wrote that with someone else, but that one is very good. That talks about really basically everything we're talking about. Like, where do our emotions come from? Why has the Lord made us this way? What do we do with our emotions? And then Henry Cloud has a podcast. I think it's called like boundaries.me or something like that. And he has a couple recent episodes where he actually talks about ways to cope with the pandemic and and he gives words to what we're experiencing. And then he has some like practical things that you can do to kind of help you get through the day. So those are kind of the 2 that I've found helpful through this.
That's helpful. I haven't heard of the podcast before. I'm gonna have to look at that or listen to that. Chad, did you have some that you wanted to recommend?
Just exclamation point after Cry of the Soul is probably all I would say. Yeah.
Well, I'll put those resources, I'll link them to this video so people can kind of go back and refer to them. But again, yeah, just starting this conversation I think is needed right now, especially not just for anyone, but especially in the church, and not being afraid to talk about emotions in a biblical framework. So thanks again to our panel. Are there any last words or encouragement or things that you think would be helpful that we didn't cover?
Mary, I was just going to say, as far as resources too, I mean, we, besides having like a bevy of professional counselors at our disposal, which is great. You know, we've got Stephen's Ministers. I mean, you're a part of that, and that's a great resource for people walking through this. And that's a great, a really good resource. I mean, that's what you guys did to put this together to deal with things like this. And obviously, I mean, that's what the session is here for as well, and the staff. I mean, we're here to, to minister to people as much as we possibly can, and pray with people and encourage people and to point them to other resources like these guys. But I mean, that's what we love to do. I mean, that's what I love to do. That's what you love to do. We've got tons of people who, either are there to listen on short term or longer term. So that's a great resource as well.
Yeah, that is a great plug for our Stephen ministry that I wasn't really planning on, but great idea. They're lay people that have been trained just in the ministry of listening. Usually it's a ministry of presence and sitting with people, but right now we're still meeting the care receivers over phone. So yeah, that's a good segue just into if anybody needs anything, don't be afraid to reach out to our church staff, our church session. We have a loving, caring church family that is ready and willing to listen. We also can point you to professional resources too if you need kind of long-term, more professional care. But I just want to thank everybody for being here and for giving your time. And I know your time is precious, but yeah, thanks for being with us. Good to see everybody's faces. I can't wait to see everybody in person. Everyone is definitely getting a hug from me. Don't fight it. John is going to be there. We're going to have a hugging line probably. I don't know.
Don't fight it. I love
Don't
it.
fight it. Yeah.
Just accept it's going to happen.
Yeah. Even the introverts are going to be ready to go back to church after all of this. So that was something I'm also a little thankful for, is just naming, like, it's okay to laugh. Is it okay to laugh in these times? I mean, humor, I've been thankful for just little snippets of humor throughout the day. So yeah, is that something that we can do?
Absolutely.
What did you
I
say?
think we have to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think just the idea that funny can never be taken away from us, no matter what the circumstances are.
That's true.
Right.
Funny can always be there, and we need it. Yeah.
Mm. Well, thanks, Chad, for affirming that. I was thinking that, but as a professional, I'm going to trust you in that it's true.
Yes.
Well, thanks again for being here, guys. And yeah, don't feel free to reach out to our church if anybody watching this needs anything. We're here because Jesus was here for us, and we like to come alongside in those caring, loving way that we can, as Christ would. So thanks again for your time, and can't wait to see you all.
See you soon.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye,
See ya.
John. Bye, Diane.
Bye.
Bye, Chad. Bye, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.